Thank you for a wonderful talk, Liz. I want to sort of make a couple of comments about Liz's talk. When Liz was talking about patriarchy and why is there this patriarchy and everything like that. So we used to live in a communal Zen center. It was like 5 adults, maybe 6 adults, and 2 little kids. And our son and Dennis Dormeyer and his then wife, Carol, they divorced later, their kid. And so our 2 kids were watching this sort of kind of really bad Greek mythology movie like Hercules or something. I don't know what it was. And one of the kids said, you know, why is this person doing this thing? And I started explaining the plot and everything. And Carol said, because he's stupid. So that's a really good way to look at it. You know, why these patriarchal things? Because they're stupid. You know, people are stupid, that's why. So, okay. So that's a really good answer to that kind of thing. Also, Liz talked a lot about kong-ans, and I'm wondering how many people here do not know what kong-ans are or have not had kong-an interviews? Yeah, okay, so I need to talk a little about kong-ans. In Japan, they're called koans, and that's the name most people are familiar with. And in China, where they originated, they're called kong-ans, and then in Korea, it's kong-ans, so we call them kong-ans. So kong-ans are these situations. A monk asked Zhaozhu in Chinese, does a dog have Buddha nature? And Zhaozhu responded, mu, which means no or has not. So that's a kong-an, it's a story. And then around that kong-an are questions, like, for example, does a dog have Buddha nature? And I will not be giving anything away when I say, if you say yes, you're wrong, and if you say no, you're wrong, and if you say maybe, you're wrong. Those are not the kind of answers that we're looking for. So kong-ans, you're presented with a situation, usually a very, very simple situation, sometimes more complicated, usually coming from 1,000 years ago, but it could be very, very contemporary. And you're asked a question about it. And the usual ways that we're taught to respond don't work. And you know, everyone, when they start kong-an practice, you have to run through all the little cues that you were given, you know, when you were a kid and when you were a teenager and when you were a young adult and a middle-aged adult and everything, an old adult. You have to run through all those sort of standard responses because what you're looking to do is to penetrate through that. And you're looking to see things with the mind of Carol, then Dormeyer, now Marshall, looking at the TV screen, and instead of responding the way I did, explaining the plot, saying, because they're stupid, you know? So it comes out of left field. So kong-an's practice, the answers, you sort of have to clear away all the kind of crap that we've, you know, that's sort of been added to us, and you have to clear that away, and then, you know, you can cut through it, and you can pierce to what's really going on. So that's kong-an practice, and it is incredibly frustrating, because everybody from the time you started talking, somewhere between the age of 2 and 3 for most people, from that moment, you were sort of given a certain way of looking at things and a certain way of responding to things, and this would get approval and that would not get approval. And so now we have all these kind of responses that are just built in. And how do you cut through that? So that's kong-an practice. And the frustration is a major part of kong-an practice because it's that frustration that usually controls us. So if we're frustrated by something, we don't want to do it. But you just keep trying, you keep persevering, and then after a while, you don't care that you're frustrated. It's not relevant. It's just like in meditation. When you meditate over the years, after a while, you start getting really bored. People nodding their heads. You get really bored. I remember, wanting to like jump out of a window, Cambridge Zen Center, a second floor window. I was so bored, I could have walked out the door. But, just this feeling, but by God, I was going to sit through that boredom. And then the boredom doesn't control you. Okay, later, you're bored. So what? So you're frustrated. So what? So keeping trying through that frustration is much more important than getting the correct answer, the answer that the teacher approves. It's much more important. What you learn in kong-ans practice is really not about getting an answer that the teacher approves. What you learn in kong-ans practice is getting through the boredom, not letting it control you, the self-judgment. I'm so stupid. I like to think of myself as smart, but I really feel stupid, Those of you who do kong-ans practice, raise your hand, everyone raise your hand. If you've gone through that, I feel so stupid, I don't like feeling stupid, right? Or the teacher doesn't like me, the teacher thinks I'm stupid, right? So all these sort of mental habits that we have of being controlled by our judgments and our frustration and our fear and our boredom, all these things, they stop controlling you because you keep going to that interview room. You just keep showing up, and after a while it's like, okay, I'm just going to do the work. And that's the real gift of kong-ans practice. That also, and learning that kind of hitting things at a slant so that you just cut through the bullshit, that's also obviously a wonderful thing to be able to do. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say about kong-ans practice. So, we have a little bit of time. Are there any questions? Yes?
I've been dealing with envy.
So dealing with envy.
So what do I do with it?
What do I do with envy? What color is it?
Green.
That's an idea somebody has. How tall is it? Yeah, you don't know how, doesn't have any height, doesn't have any color. What's it made out of? Is it wool? Is it steel? What is it made out of? Yeah, right, okay. So this is a ghost. Envy is a ghost. Ghosts are transparent. It's just envy. Doesn't have to control you. Give it a cup of tea. Tell it to sit in the corner. Yeah. All these things, envy, anger, fear, all these things, they take over. They just take over. Even love can be that way. Becomes very self-centered. Love can be very self-centered. Oh, I'm in love. Takes us over. Then we can't function, right? You know that, or you wouldn't have asked that question. So yeah. So just, it's okay. Just doesn't have to control you. And I really do find it helpful when, these very strong feelings a while to really look at it, while I'm practicing. What color are you? What are you made out of? What's your substance? How much do you weigh? How tall are you? Right? It really helps because there's no answer to that, right? So yeah, thank you for your question. There another question? Yes.
How did you come to Zen practice?
How did I come to Zen practice? Good question. I'll give the short version. So, maybe it's the medium version. A long time ago, I was extremely unhappy and confused, a little bit delusional, somewhat suicidal, and I was desperate. And I read in a New York Times magazine, this was like 1974 maybe, I read about relaxation response. Nobody in this country knew about meditation back then. It was not in the popular culture. There was no mindfulness, none of that stuff. Nobody knew anything, but there was this thing about relaxation response, which was basically about being healthy with heart disease. But I grabbed it, and I started doing that every day, 20 minutes a day. And, I'd be driving cross country with friends, and I'd say, 4 o'clock, stop the car. Everyone get out of the car. I'm going to sit in the back seat and meditate. I don't know how people put up with me. But anyway, so, I just clung to this. And at the same time, I found this amazing Gestalt therapist. And I cannot recommend Gestalt therapy enough. It's a lot like kong-ans. you know, a lot like kong-ans. So you come in, you say, I had a dream. Oh, wonderful, tell me about your dream. Well, I was walking on a road. What's it like to be the road? It's not about the road, you know, I want, no, tell me what it's like to be the road, okay? All right, the road is gray, I'm walking on it. No, I am the road is gray, nobody notices it, everybody's walking on it, nobody appreciates me, and in a minute you're like, you know, blubbering. So it hits you slantwise. It's that slantwise thing, where it's not like talk, 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 talk. And that's what I needed, because I was very verbally facile. And so nobody could help me because I was so facile. But anyway, so yeah, so I worked with Ludmilla Hoffman, was her name, for about 2 years. And I was doing this meditation at the same time. And then one day I looked at her and I said, I don't have to be this way, do I? And she said, no, you don't. And it lifted. Half the people in this room have heard this 1,000 times. It lifted like a tornado lifts. It just lifted from me, this kind of distorted way of seeing things. It just lifted, which is not to say I'm always happy and I never, you know, get upset or anxious, but it's just this kind of base sort of confusion lifted. And then it was Yom Kippur, and as people know, I'm a sort of semi-observant Jew, and I always celebrated Yom Kippur, and I usually would go and hike in the mountains, because at that point I was not into synagogues or anything. So, but I couldn't hike in the mountains because I was looking for a job, and I had to do all this stuff having to do with applying for jobs. So I noticed that there was a Zen center in Cambridge, where I was living, Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I decided I'd celebrate Yom Kippur by going to a Zen center to meditate. And there was this beautiful Zen center that I walked by all the time. But the address in the phone book was different. I figured, oh, that must have closed. So I found myself in Allston, Massachusetts, very funky Cambridge Zen center in the beginning. It was incredibly funky. You know, people were spraying each other with you know, the plant sprayers while they're wearing their long robes, and you know, people are in the kitchen and everything like that, and I just felt home. I'd come home, you know, and then somebody hit the bell, and it's like, oh my God, I am home. So that's how I came to Zen practice. Yeah, right. Thank you. But everyone comes to Zen practice in their own way. That is, of those who do, which is not very many, but of those who do come to Zen practice, everyone comes differently. And sometimes people go away for a while and they come back. Sometimes they go away, they never come back. It's all okay, you know? We all have our karma, and we're all working out our karma. So thank you for your question. Any other questions? Yes?
Is there a traditional Zen way for children to practice something like kong-ans, to work on boredom and frustration?
Okay, so is there a traditional Zen practice for kids to work on boredom, frustration? There is no traditional Zen practice for kids. That's really the standard thing in Asia until really probably the 20th century, maybe the 19th, was for kids to for lay people to be devotional. So you'd go and you'd chant for somebody, or you'd go and do prostrations, or you'd light incense or something like that, and your kids would come along with you. But the serious meditation practice, those practices were generally, not always, but generally reserved for monastics. And there are exceptions that go back like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 years. But generally those, the really sort of dedicated practice was for monastics. And lay people did this kind of devotional practice. And so the kids would trot along and they'd learn that. That's what they would do. And then some of them would decide to be monastics and most of them wouldn't. And then certainly in America, and possibly also, I think maybe in Asia as well now, somewhere around 50 or 60 years ago, people started deciding that kids should have some kind of practice. And because your daughter's, in our Dharma school. And so you have the little meditation cushions and the kids are taught sort of kid-appropriate meditation techniques, and they don't sit for 40 minutes, they sit for like 3 or 5 or something. And they, depending on the group, they might be, taught a little chanting or a little prostrations or whatever. Always there are moral lessons, like, in our Dharma school, we certainly teach about things like compassion. We teach about things like clarity of mind. We teach about things like that. And I'm sure that we teach about things like dealing with anxiety and things like that. But it's not traditional Buddhist. It's coming from sort of the American Buddhist culture to try to help our kids. So this is a fairly new thing in Buddhism. The traditional thing the kids just absorb from hanging out with their parents in the temples. So yeah, and you can be part of setting the curriculum. I think you probably are. Are you one of the teachers? Yeah? No, you could be, and then you'd be part of setting the curriculum and everything like that. So yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, that's a very new thing, and it'll be interesting to see how many of the kids stick, when they grow up. So, thank you. And we're out of time. So, Charlie, I'm going to ask you to